The Gospel Live.
Innovator and radio genius Gerard Bonner helped launch GospelFlavor.com in 1997, a website that reviews gospel albums but interviews the stars such as Mary Mary, Todd Tribbett, and Kirk Franklin. In 2009, Mr. Bonner launched Bonnerfied Radio, a 24/7 internet radio broadcast which has changed the face for Christian radio. Bonner believes that no matter what genre of music you're in, there's always an audience for it. What's up, guys? It's DeKevious, and you're tuned into the Gospel Live. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing a legendary man of radio, a man of God, an intelligent man. He had like a 5.3 GPA growing up. Mr. Gerard Bonner. It is so good to have you, sir.
Good to be here, man.
Yes,
Thank you so
yes.
much.
First question. Before there was Bonner Radio, there was Gospel Flavor.
Yes.
What was the inspiration behind that?
It's funny you mentioned it. So I was in college, and I loved gospel music. This is 95, 96, 97. And I realized, like, there's no representation of gospel music in terms of news on the internet at that time. So we were in a chat room with some other friends of mine. And the chat room back 95, 96, that was a big deal. So we just kept talking about things in the industry. We didn't really know our connections at the time. But I ended up finding out that between the four of us, we represented different parts of the gospel music industry. One person was an artist, another was in management, another was in radio, and at the time I was in retail. So the four of us came together and said, seeing that we don't see a representation of gospel entertainment news on the website, or on the web, that we would create that. And that's how Gospel Flavor began in 1997.
Take us from 97 until now,
okay.
With what you do, and you have the opportunity of reviewing artists' work.
Yeah.
What goes into that, and what makes a good piece of work, you feel?
I think obviously there's great production that's involved. I think it's important that the sound is a great sound, and in terms of production, it needs to be obviously clear. It needs to be a scenario where it doesn't sound like it's in a tin can, that kind of thing. Those are kind of like technical pieces, but there needs to be heart in the music. I'm not necessarily sold on that it has to be certain lyrical content, but it does need to make sense, and then obviously vocally it needs to be strong. And again, the thing about music is it's hard to, I majored in math. Yeah. So that means I'm a pretty logical thinker. So being logical and creative is weird. So it's weird for me to say I can't exactly pinpoint it, because as a logical person, I'm like, but the thing about music is it's about feeling. What feels really good, what feels organic, what feels authentic, what grabs you. So obviously a great hook, a great melody, of course, right, and something that's going to stick with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great music.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, and you being in the radio industry, and we've had the greats, like we were talking about Walt Baby Love.
Yes.
And how he was the epitome of what radio should have been in the 90s.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the state of the radio now?
Radio is very different these days. It's like this. This is, again, I was talking about logic versus creative.
Right.
There were some things that happened in the 70s and 80s and 90s in terms of music and in radio that you could not put a formula on, and it marked great success. The problem that we have now is people are trying to put a formula on it, and music is not meant to have a formula. It's not meant for that. So your problem in radio right now is just that. So they're saying we need this kind of song at format, and they're telling you what to play, and they're not making room for new artists, and they're not making room for new sounds. And so what's happening is now the artist who's coming up is not saying, I want to create good music. They're now saying, I want to create music that gets on the radio. Music that gets on the radio isn't necessarily what I'm creating, but okay. And so now it creates an artist that lacks authenticity. And so we're losing, we don't have greats like Marvin Gaye and Prince and Michael Jackson really in our midst creating anymore. If you think about it, man, when we grew up in the 80s and things like that, you had all of these guys at the same time.
And there was room.
And there was room because everybody was willing to be creative. But now people are trying to reach a formula. And that's what you're seeing at radio right now. So I think what it does for the consumer is a lot of consumers are upset with FM radio right now because they don't like what's being fed to them. So that's where they go to places like the internet and satellite, and then they go to SoundCloud and YouTube and Apple Music and all these things because they can now get the music that they really want, and they end up discovering new artists, which is what radio used to do.
Yeah. So even like, I guess when you brought up the formula.
Yes.
The formula, and correct me if I'm wrong, has in some way created a division between the artist, the creativity, the authenticity, and the consumer.
Absolutely.
So do you think we would ever get back to that state of...
I think it's going to happen. Well, here's the thing. There's always a thing that happens that builds revolution. We're seeing that in society now, where if you continue to oppress a person, they're going to eventually rise up.
Right.
Hence the Black Lives Matter movement, hence the big giant women's movement we've been seeing. All of the outspokenness against our current president is all because people have been oppressed. Right. And it's like, all right, well, we got to fix this. I think the same thing is happening in music, where the consumer is saying, we don't care about the fact that y'all want to get paid. We love good music. Give us good music. So now it's causing the rise of the independent artist. And that's why we see like a Chance the Rapper who can now have things on the Grammy side recreated. I mean, they literally changed the rules to accommodate him, and he wins 3 Grammys. It's unheard of, and I don't think people really understood how big that was. It was a statement that says the independent artist can now create again. And that's what's been lost. So I think it's going to happen.
We even see that with the rise of, Solange
Absolutely.
won her first Grammy. Yeah. And she's been in the industry for a minute.
She has. And she decided to finally do music that was authentic to her. She took her time, worked on it, and it created a sound. And people responded. And they didn't respond because she was Beyonce's sister.
Yeah.
They responded because it was good music. Yeah.
Right.
People are always going to want good music.
Yeah.
Always.
So, you brought up the Black Lives Matter, the Women's Right March, even with the current government, with our president. Do you think, and this is my own theory, where government education ends, that's where music begins for people?
That's very interesting. That's a great word. Government and education ends, music begins. I also believe that music has always been a tool of education. Think about this. Most of us learned our ABCs through a song. A, B, C, D, E. We learned it. Music has always been an integral part of education. And I don't think that'll ever stop. I think, the government may not see the value in it, so they try to pull funding from it, but you can't stop something as creative as music. We will always find another way.
Right.
And that's where the internet has come in, that's where streaming has come in, that's where, again, you have places like SoundCloud and social media and all. People are going to find a way to get that great music out. You can't stop that.
Hashtag keep Sesame Street alive.
Keep it alive.
Yes.
We need it.
So you talk about different apps that we use now.
Yes.
There you have Spotify, Apple Music. Now, Jay-Z, Beyonce's husband, Tidal.
Yes.
How important was that for the music industry and the artists?
I think Tidal was interesting for artists. Obviously, it was designed to really give artists a bigger cut, some more exclusives. I think the challenge is when you're competing with something as massive as Spotify and Apple Music, it becomes a challenge. And so, the thing that, whenever you're trying to create an alternative, you are going to have to compete with what's already out there.
Right.
And so you've got to figure out, how do we do that successfully? I think the jury's still out on the real success of Tidal, because I think they started some things and they tried to build it off of the back of, we are Jay-Z, we are this.
Yeah.
I remember they brought all these musicians together and had this, but it didn't really last. You know what I mean? Like, Tidal, it's cool, but a lot of people, again, functionality, will prefer other things. So again, and this is the challenge. You can create something for artists and musicians, but that doesn't translate to consumers, because there are always more consumers than there are musicians.
Wow, that's
Always.
a very good
So
point.
that's why artists and musicians have to be careful about how they create music. You can't create, think about this. Do you ever think there was a time where jazz was considered pop music?
Okay. History lesson.
Early times, jazz was pop music. But what happened was the consumer stopped being able to really consume that. They needed simpler. Hence, pop music and jazz began to fade away.
What piece of advice, words of wisdom, would you give a young artist trying to get into the industry and, of course, trying to have radio success?
Yeah, I would say be authentic, be original. I think that what is lacking in our industry is originality. People are afraid to be themselves because they don't know who they are. So they've taken their musical identity and their identity on a personal level from everything else around them, from society, from, how many social media likes and followers they get, instead of being comfortable with who they are. Figure out who you are and then present that to the world. And there will always be an audience for that. Now, the question is whether that audience is at radio or on the internet or in some other media. There will always be an audience for authenticity. And that's the key. I think if you really want success, you've got to be authentic. Now, in being authentic, you also have to learn how to operate within the system. So what that means is, if I'm a musician, I can't give you all of my musical licks in one song.
Right.
I have to spread that out and give something. And again, there are more consumers than there are musicians. So I've got to figure out, how do I take my genius and bring it to a level that's palatable for the average consumer, so that they're interested enough in me buying an album and things of that nature. So I would say be original. That's the biggest thing I can tell. Be original and be authentic.
Got you.
Yeah.
Well, guys, you have heard it here first. I'm DeKevious, and I'm with the legendary Gerard Bonner,
Thank you,
and
sir.
we thank you so much for being here. And guys, we are out. Next time on The Gospel Insider.
If the kingdom people will do what we're supposed to do first, I believe healing will begin and it'll be quicker. You understand what I'm saying? I believe we'll see a rapid response from heaven in our land. But my music is that response. My music is the spiritual response. First, let's praise God. First, let's worship Him. Before we go to Him with the issue, let's praise Him because He can handle anything we ask. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
He's able to do exceeding abundantly. So let's praise Him first just because He's able. And to me, my music is that posture.